into this mess, but more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, the government's Small Boats Week ended in tragedy after much fuss. Tonight, we have an exclusive story by GB News' Mark White from Brighton. He went there on a police raid at the weekend, and you'll begin to understand why so many people are crossing the English Channel, because they can work as delivery drivers and work illegally within the British economy. More tonight on the mysterious B Corps, which I introduced you to last Thursday, and how they want actually to change the law in Britain to force all employers to be politically correct. And our fight against the cashless society, particularly in pubs, this week steps up a gear or two. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story tonight on GB News is that police in Northern Ireland say they're confident that leaked data of officers and staff is in the hands of dissident Republicans. Earlier, Sinn Féin confirmed that a redacted version of the police data that had been posted on a wall facing its Belfast offices, which it described as sinister. Last week, the details of 10,000 police officers and staff were published online by mistake. Well, this afternoon at a news conference, Chief Constable Simon Byrne said police are now operating under the assumption the data will be used to generate fear and uncertainty.
We are now confident that the workforce data set is in the hands of dissident Republicans, and it's therefore a planning assumption that they will use this list to generate fear and uncertainty, as well as intimidating or targeting officers and staff. I won't go into detail for operational reasons, but we are working round the clock to assess this risk and take measures to mitigate it.
Well, in other news tonight, a construction worker has died after being injured at Everton's new football stadium being built in Liverpool. Police said the 26-year-old man died in hospital earlier following an incident at the construction site in Bramley Moor Dock. The stadium's contractor says work has been suspended until further notice. Everton said everyone at the club was heartbroken. Now, the government says it's trying to clarify when officials were made aware of the Legionella concerns on board the Bibby Stockholm accommodation barge. That's after Dorset Council said Home Office contractors were told traces of the bacteria were detected on the day asylum seekers boarded the barge. All 39 migrants were removed from the vessel on Friday. Downing Street says it expects them to return as soon as possible. Bidders for high street retailer Wilko have been given until Wednesday to put forward offers to buy the firm. The general goods chain fell into administration last week, putting the future of its 400 stores and around 12,000 jobs at risk. It's understood administrators from PwC have set the deadline to try to secure a deal in a bid to prevent redundancies. Shoppers in Nottingham said they were disappointed with the outcome. Now, Network Rail has released video of dangerous behaviour at railway level crossings. If you're watching on television, take a look at this CCTV compilation showing a person doing press-ups on a railway line and also dog walkers sitting their pets on the railway tracks for photographs and even children putting stones on the line. Nearly 50 cases of misuse have been reported by train drivers or caught on CCTV in Worcestershire and the West Midlands so far this year. Network Rail says it's trying to raise awareness and discourage from people from risking their lives on the lines. This is GB News across the UK on your TV, in your car, on your digital radio and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, it was Small Boats Week and it was a disaster. Very large numbers crossed the English Channel. A drone crashed into the English Channel and a Border Force boat broke down. And that was all before Saturday morning, when in pretty choppy conditions, I was stunned that 500 people crossed the Channel. And I'm afraid, not shocked or surprised, that 6 more people drowned. Much of this happened on the French side of the Channel. And there's been much criticism of the French Navy. Why weren't they quick enough? But you know what? When people go overboard into the Channel, you probably haven't got very long to get to them. But I want to say this. We've given £500 million to the French to stop the crossings. And actually, they do stop a lot of boats. They put knives into the inflatables, but they're being expected to police a stretch of coastline that stretches for 60 or 70 miles. But this is the one thing that really gets me. Once one of those dinghies is afloat, even if it's 100 yards off a French beach, then the standard practice, is the French Navy then escort that vessel to a 12-mile line from the British coast, where they literally hand it over to Border Force or the lifeboats, depending who is there first. And all the while, the French are escorting those boats out of their waters into ours. We frankly shouldn't be paying them a single penny. The argument is, well, if we try to stop them and turn them around, if we try and take them on board, they threaten to throw the children into the Channel. These are the blackmail tactics that are being used by those trying to cross the Channel. But you know what? After a week or so of doing this, the boats would stop leaving French beaches. The French escorts simply must. They have to stop. And I'd also say this. There are constant talk of cracking down on the human traffickers, and much talk of gunfire that took place in one of the camps before that boat launched and sank with a loss of 6 lives on Saturday. But traffickers having guns is nothing new. Take a look at this individual. Front there, and there he is helping a boat launch off the beach. Well, here he is again. See the gun? There he is in his tent. there's the gun, and we've got more footage of this individual that we can show you. Clearly identifiable, and there he is. And there's a load of migrants there being pushed away from the beaches by the French police. He is an Afghan trafficker. He's been doing this for the last 2 years. His name is thought to be Jawed. And there he is, on the beaches, on the roads, showing a gun, and it's all available on TikTok, and yet he's still able to do it. As I say, the French authorities may well be stopping boats leaving the beaches, but what's the point when the same people are back there the next day? Not only do the French escorts simply have to stop, but, and I do think this is very, very important, people like that are advertising on TikTok are easy to track down. They need to be arrested and charged. It won't stop the trade of itself, but it will at least help. Why are they all coming? Well, one of the reasons is it's so easy to work in the black economy in this country. And food delivery companies are now being urged to carry out more detailed checks on who their drivers are, as authorities report a huge increase in undocumented immigrants exploiting the rules to work in the sector. Home Office officials say working in a shadow economy is a major pull factor. You'd never have guessed it, would you, for those embarking on the dangerous journeys? Well, our Home and Security Head, Mark White, was given exclusive access as immigration enforcement officers launched a major crackdown on this scam with raids and special operations in a number of cities. And Mark joined them in Brighton at the weekend.
In towns and cities across the UK, these delivery drivers are everywhere. We all use them, but increasingly, the person who turns up at your door is breaking the law. We can reveal a massive surge in the number of illegal immigrants working in the delivery sector. We're with immigration enforcement officers in Brighton city centre, a joint operation with Sussex Police as they target the delivery drivers they suspect of working illegally. Police have just stopped this rider on the seafront. As they carry out checks, immigration enforcement teams hang back, out of sight, so as not to alert other drivers that they're around. This rider's documents checked out, and he was cleared to go. Just round the corner, other immigration officers have stopped an Indonesian delivery driver.
But he is currently under arrest though. First of all, I need to take a photograph of him.
Checks on him indicate he is working here illegally and likely faces deportation. Just 4 years ago, immigration enforcement were only really encountering a handful of illegal immigrants working in the gig economy. Now it's vast. It is one of the key target areas for these officers. This operation is part of a major crackdown specifically targeting those exploiting the gig economy, where legitimate self-employed delivery drivers often rent out their accounts to undocumented workers.
They're undercutting legitimate employers and they're undercutting legitimate employees, both who are trying to undertake things playing by the rules. And it really is a major issue.
Immigration, can you come to the door, please?
In East London, other officers are targeting the homes of undocumented drivers.
You don't see him coming in and out. Do they have a motorbike?
The suspect here has, it seems, moved on to another address. Not uncommon, given the transitory nature of undocumented immigrants. Back in Brighton, this Brazilian rider has just been arrested after trying to escape by going the wrong way up a one-way street.
He's spotted immigration officers, we think, and he's tried to flee. It looks, the early indications are that he's working in breach of his entry conditions to the UK.
There are those who feel these riders are doing little harm, and these raids are a distraction from the trauma and tragedy unfolding all too often in the Mediterranean and in the English Channel this past weekend. But authorities say illegal working and illegal journeys are absolutely linked.
Illegal working is a major pull factor for illegal migration into the UK. If you know you're coming to the UK with a job, you're more likely to travel here illegally and also undertake potentially unsafe journeys.
The Home Office say many delivery companies are increasingly cooperating in the efforts to stop illegals exploiting their services. But they still need to do far more to check those delivering food and goods in their name are who they say they are. Mark White, GB News, Brighton.
Well, great work there by Mark White and his GB News team. And I'll bet you, that's not just in Brighton, I'll bet you that scam is going on in every single town in this country, because obviously we have no idea, literally no idea, how many people have settled here illegally in the last 25 years or so. Well, to react to that and the idea that the Home Office now tell us that we can expect 5 more years. Yes, 5 more years of channel crossings. That is what the Home Office expect. I wonder whether you at home find that acceptable. Give me your thoughts. Farage@gbnews.com. Well, neighbouring Brighton is, of course, East Worthing and Shoreham, and Tim Loughton is the Conservative Member of Parliament for that area. Tim, your reaction to those scenes from Brighton over the weekend?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased that Sussex Police mounted that operation, and we need more operations like that up and down the country, as you say. I mean, the government has only recently trebled the fines available for people working here illegally. It's £60,000 now per employee for anybody who's found not to be working here illegally. That is not a small amount. In addition to which, landlords can be fined if they've got tenants, again, who are not allowed to be in the country. So there are big penalties there. The trouble is, we need those penalties to be enforced, and we need more operations like the one we saw in Brighton up and down the country. And we need greater cooperation from some of the big gig employers as well. You know, these are big companies. This is a big business in delivery now. They need to be doing their bit in making sure they're properly scrutinising not just those people they think are cycling for them, but those who are actually delivering to the door if it's being subcontracted as well. That's completely unacceptable, and they need to do more about it.
Tim, you make the point quite reasonably that the fines have gone up substantially for those that have been seen to aiding and abetting work in the illegal part of our economy. But the Labour Party point out that convictions for this have actually fallen over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. And doesn't this, in some ways, rather sum up what we're getting from successive Conservative governments? Tough talk, but really, when it comes to it, not enough action.
Well, I don't know what the level of convictions actually is, whether that is right or not. If they have been falling, then clearly more needs to be done about it, given that we've got more people coming here illegally across the channel that we know about. And if they've had their claims rejected and then have disappeared into the ether, they're likely to be doing some form of illegal work. So it's a function of the Home Office and of the police that needs to be beefed up. I entirely agree with that, but now there's a limit to the penalties you can bring in, but it's enforcement that's absolutely key here.
Now, Tim, let's be honest. Last week, Rishi Sunak's Small Boats Week, announcements coming out every day. We heard about the Ascension Islands and much else. Let's face it, the week was a disaster, wasn't it? The week was a disaster. There is no prospect of anything this government is doing ending the problem. And to get this report overnight that the Home Office expect this to continue for a further 5 years. Haven't the Tory government completely failed on this?
OK, so first of all, I think it was a hostage to fortune focusing on Small Boats Week, particularly in the middle of August, when you're completely at the mercy of the weather conditions improving, when they tend to have more boats coming across, and the tactics of the people smugglers, who are exceedingly flexible in how they try and get people over here. They use fewer but larger boats, they use more and smaller boats, or whatever. We've seen how they operate. It's not true to say the Home Office is predicting this for 5 years, Nigel. I saw the report. What it's based on is the value for money assessment on using some of these ex-military and prison camps on a 5-year calculation, how it stacks up against having to use completely inappropriately all these hotels in towns and cities up and down the country. That doesn't mean it's going to last for 5 years, but absolutely there needs to be a value for money case for why we should be using alternatives, whether it be barges, whether it be ex-military camps, whether it be former prisons or whatever. That's what this is about. Hopefully, we are not going to be having this same problem still in 5 years' time.
Well, we've been having it since 2018, and it gets worse every year. A final thought on this, Tim. You know, British judges will rely on the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act makes it very difficult to deport people. The Human Rights Act, of course, is because of the incorporation of the European Convention on Human Rights into British law. Isn't it time we left the Strasbourg court and decided for ourselves how we deal with these issues?
I think that's a bit of a red herring, Nigel, frankly. There are three things that need to be done before we have to start looking at that. First is to stop the boats coming across, and that's where the French absolutely need to step up, and they could stop it overnight by intercepting those boats in the water and bringing the passengers back to French beaches. Or when they actually do intercept, as they are doing more of, with our money and our kit, those on the beaches, they confiscate the boat, but let the migrants go. So they come back the following night or the following night, and they only have to get lucky once. That's got to change. Secondly, the Home Office has got to absolutely step up the time it takes to process their claims. And thirdly, we need to be much better and have more agreements about returning those who have a failed asylum case. All those things absolutely need to happen.
Yes, and my point, Tim, on your third point, my point is, all the while we're signed up to ECHR, that is incredibly difficult.
It is certainly does not make it easy. There are some serious downsides if we were not part of ECHR. But if you look at ECHR and people getting so worked up about it, there have been 400 rulings by the European Convention in the last 10 years that have not been complied with. In Spain or Italy, they don't comply with something like 63% of them.
Yeah, but we
Germany
do, Tim.
30-something percent. France, it's 30%. We tend to comply with most of them. The whole thing needs to be properly reformed. And frankly, if we were to go against one of these rulings, it should not be such a big issue because, frankly, other European nations have been doing it for several years. So
I feel we're replaying the Brexit debate. Let's reform the EU from within, and we decided in the end we had to leave. Tim Lawton, thank you.
This is not part of the EU. This is not part of the EU, and there are other countries unhappy about it as well. These pajama injunctions, which are an absolute farce, need absolutely to be...
I'd be out tomorrow personally, but OK, I hear what you say, and thank you for joining us this evening.
And then, Nigel, you would be subject to an awful lot of persecution, which you've had recently without the protections of the law as well. There are downsides as well. You might not actually like some of the consequences of what you're now wishing.
Well, I have to say, I haven't felt much protection from Coutts Bank, from human rights, but you never know. Anything is possible. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. In a moment, more on this sinister organisation called B Corps and how they actually want to change the law to make things even worse.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So he's up to 5 more years of the cross-channel boats. Acceptable! Well, your reactions, I think, fairly predictable, but quite interesting. Ryan says, this is entirely unacceptable. These men pose a threat to the safety of our nation. Strong stuff. What makes it worse is how blatant they are on TikTok about their criminal activities. Ryan, I know, and in the case of that gun toter that we showed you earlier, he's been there for 2 years. You can see him on the beaches, helping launch the boats. He's still there with his gun. And Paul says, and this is interesting, we need a referendum on illegal migration, let the people decide. I wonder, Paul, whether we don't need a referendum on immigration as a whole, because it isn't just illegal immigration that's an issue. This government was elected on a Brexit ticket. Realistically, we expected that would mean numbers would fall. They're going through the roof. Now, I talked last week a bit about the FCA, but possibly not quite enough. The executive director of the FCA, Sheldon Mills, makes it absolutely clear that when it comes to diversity and inclusion, that, I quote, this will increasingly form part of the FCA's supervisory engagement strategy, and you should expect to be challenged more on these issues. So basically, the FCA, under Sheldon Mills, isn't about whether your money's safe, isn't about whether your investments are doing well, it's about whether companies working within financial services are obeying a political agenda that he believes in. And a subset of the FCA, and yes, of course, the fish does rot from the head down, but I talked to you on Thursday about B Corp. Well, Thomas Harris is Director of Data and Impact at the Free Speech Union. And Thomas, apparently, this B Corp group, who seem to, you know, now have nearly 2,000 British companies that are certified by B Corp, Coutts Bank, of course, no surprise here at all. But they now actually want to change the law. There was a big piece of legislation on companies put into place in 2006. Tell us what they're trying to do.
So the Companies Act 2006, what B-Lab UK, who certify B corporations, B Corps, what they have as one of their campaigns is called the Better Business Act. And that involves a coalition of people and organisations who are trying to change the Companies Act 2006, Section 172, so that it's not just about profit. The fiduciary duty of directors won't just be about profit, but it will also be about the planet, about people, and about profit. And that's the sort of stakeholder...
So it all sounds very cuddly and very lovely, but actually it is a deeply politicised agenda, isn't it?
It is. And the reason for that is because where we have seen this happen so far, the models that we've seen have been things like B Corps, which have within them sort of juiced up speech codes, or at least B-Lab UK, who sets the standards and the certification process. They have what they call JEDI, which isn't just equity, diversity and inclusion, which is already a speech code in the office. It's already tripping people up like a bunch of tripwires. It's now got the J on the front, so that's social justice, that's climate justice, that's racial justice. And when you add that to the tripwires we've already got in the office, it's almost like sort of live wiring them.
But it's interesting, isn't it? This word inclusion. What lovely people we are. We believe in inclusion. But if you were to happen to say that you perhaps don't think it's appropriate that 5-year-olds are read stories by drag queens, suddenly you become excluded, you become excommunicated, you become a non-person. So despite the language, the agenda actually is it is encouraging a bullying culture.
This is what we see at the Free Speech Union every day. We've had 2,000 cases. 1 in 20 of those have been about these lovely sounding words, equity, diversity and inclusion. And they exclude the mavericks, they exclude the heretics, they exclude...
Well, actually, the majority of the population...
The majority of the population.
Is what they exclude. Now, it's interesting to see that in Scotland, the Sturgeon government, I mean, she's not there anymore, but the Sturgeon government has got very, very close to B Corp.
This is interesting. It was a piece of research we did following the report that we published last Thursday, that BLab UK in 2018 set up a coalition with the Scottish government called Scotland Can Be, whereby the ideas of B corporations, let's kind of transform those to the national level and have Scotland almost be like its own B Corp. And so that was set up in 2018. And that's almost like a foretaste of what might happen with this Better Business Act. And if the Labour government gets in, or a Labour government gets in, it might be waved through nationwide.
I take the point, Thomas, that if the Labour government get in, we're going to see a lot more identity politics, we're going to see a lot more, frankly, division, as I see it in the country. But what have the Tories done to arrest all of this? What have they done to stop any of this in 13 years?
That's a great question.
Their Equalities Act, you could argue, has actually opened the door to BLab and people like B Corp and people like this.
Well, it's all happened and accelerated at such a rate. In the higher education world, we have had the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act brought in by this government, which is a great win because academics and students have really been labouring under this erosion of free speech and erosion of academic freedom. So that has come in under this government. So it has listened to us in some cases, but so much of this is happening under the radar and links back to ESG.
But, for those very depressed at home by all of this, history tells us that pendulums can swing back, and when they do, they can do it very quickly.
They can. They can, and we have seen this in the world of gender-critical beliefs. We've seen that the coalitions have formed.
Yeah, I mean, take women's sport, for example. Where women's sports got together and to listen to Sebastian Coe
and Sharon Davies.
And Sharon Davies has been one of the great campaigners for it. But there have been big changes in women's sport, not to mention, you know, the double rapist in Scotland who decided that suddenly she was a woman and wanted to go to women's prison, and the Scottish public saying, you know what, we're done with this. So pendulums can swing back. Keep up the good work, Thomas Harris at the Free Speech Union, who, of course, themselves suffered their own debanking problems with PayPal. In a moment, let's talk about this growth of the cashless society. Pubs in London now refusing cash. What can we do to fight back?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, GB News are well through 250,000 signatures for our Don't Kill Cash campaign. But we're not the only group out there fighting for this. Now, Martin Quinn is campaign director of the Payment Choice Alliance. And Martin, you've been selflessly going around the pubs in London, ordering drinks and trying to pay with £20 notes.
Well, I've been doing it with tenors, Nigel, as well. Okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But, yeah, I mean, so what... I thought I'd start it off a little bit. Back in sort of February, I was going into a pub called the Suffolk Tavern, which is in London Bridge. I went in to order a pint, and pint was served, but straight away they shoved the cash, the payment card machine to your face. Yeah. And I've gone, well, what about cash? And they've gone, no, it's card only. So I had a decision to make: do I leave the pint there, or do I get a debit card out, which I had to do. And that happened a few times in other places, and. But probably prior to that, I decided, well, change it. That's on the pints aspect. But why I got involved in the first place was pre-COVID. I was having a coffee in Tunbridge Wells in a national chain, and a group of disabled people came in with their carers. And if you've ever seen anything this going on, they have their little money bag, and they've got, maybe it's £5 they've been given, and they've got to put the receipt in to prove it. So they're all sitting down, really excited. It might be their only outing of the day. They've got to the counter to be served, and of course the barista said, "Sorry, it's card only."
Really?
Now you should have seen the faces of these poor people on the seats. Yeah. They had to walk out, and that galvanised me. I had an argument with the barista. It didn't matter. After that, I left there myself, and I set up a government petition to basically to say that we need businesses and shops that must accept cash. Now, at the time, I was probably too early. We didn't quite get enough traction. And since then, a couple more petitions did actually reach the threshold of 10,000. It was debated in Parliament, but this government have turned around and said, we're protecting cash, don't worry about it.
But they're not, are they?
No, of course not, no. What they're saying is that, oh, you know, we're going to keep legal tender. But the problem is, and a lot of the people out there will say, well, yes, but I've got legal tender, you've got to accept it. No. The misnomer with legal tender is quite straightforward. Yes, it's legal tender, but it means nothing in the day-to-day. Legal tender means if I owe a debt, I can't be sued in court. It means nothing with the provision of goods and services. So legal tender, you know, protected legal tender doesn't really matter.
So what do we need to do?
We simply need a Payment Choice Act. what that really means is that if you go into a business, we need the government or this government or the next one to mandate simply a Payment Choice Act where you've got to accept cash, you've got to accept cards, you've got to accept whatever.
Trouble is, Martin Quinn, that Rishi Sunak is pushing full speed ahead for the introduction, albeit in limited form to begin with, of a central bank digital currency from 2030.
Yeah, they are, but equally, at the end of the day, I mean, we just cannot afford to lose cash. If you think about, I mentioned some vulnerable people there, but, you know, there's the elderly, there's the financially excluded, there's, for example, you know, people who are in abusive relationships who are having their money controlled, their finances controlled. They need access to cash. They need to be able to spend the cash.
Well, my worry is a strong libertarian worry that we head down the digitised route and they start to control what we can spend our money on. And they're doing it already in some ways. Martin, good luck with the campaign.
Thank you, Nigel.
You were on this before me, but I hope I've helped a little bit. And GB News certainly very, very much.
But all I would say, anyone that's obviously viewing, go to the Payment Choice Alliance, write to your MP. There's a template on there, and do just... write to your MP and demand change.
And the website?
It's paymentchoicealliance.org // take action.
Take action, absolutely.
Take
action this day.
Right,
very good. Right, now my What the Farage moment. I couldn't believe this over the weekend. Sadiq Khan, yes, I know he's not exactly a favourite of many on this channel, is organising on the 2nd of September a big event in Trafalgar Square. And it's to celebrate black culture and diverse black culture. And you can see what's happening. There's an election coming up next year, and he's playing to identity politics. But this is all bad news, because it's all horribly, horribly divisive. What if somebody tried to organise a white culture day, an English culture day? It would be absolutely condemned and decried by none other than Sadiq Khan. Right, let's have a good news story, shall we? A really good news story is that the bluefin tuna, this magnificent beast, has returned to British waters. It came back perhaps a decade ago. Devon, Cornwall, the Channel Islands, and has been spreading further east. And I grew up with tales of these fish being caught up off Scarborough and Whitby, either side of the wars, and you can see me there with a tuna caught down in Cornwall. We're now in year 3 of a recreational fishery, the Chart programme, as it's called, and this is tag and release, and it's been a great success. 25 boats have been licensed to do it, and that picture you can see there is really of a massive bluefin tuna that was caught off Penzance. But from tomorrow, there's actually going to be the beginning of a limited commercial fishery. And one man, his name is Chris Gill, he fishes out of Mevagissey. He's in charge of the Cornish Handline Association, which is sustainable fishing to your plate, and he's skipper of a charter fishing boat and a commercial fishing boat out of Mevagissey. And Chris, you have campaigned for us to have a commercial tuna fishery, and it begins tomorrow. Tell us more.
It does. Been working with DEFRA on and off for 4 or 5 years. I started working with the bluefin tuna back in 2018, tagging fish with tunas, also on the Chart programme, and I've done that for 3 years. Been working tirelessly, really, with several people in the Handline Association. I'm the vice chairman, and we've been pushing DEFRA for this commercial quota. We've got a very small quota of 39 tonnes. Europe has 44,000 tonnes. So it's a very small drop in the ocean.
Yeah, but Chris, it's a start. And as you know, and I know many of us are disappointed that Brexit hasn't delivered all the things that we hoped, immigration, etc. But actually, prior to Brexit, we were not a tuna country at all. It may be small, but it is progress, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's a little pilot project that the Handline Association put together. We put that into DEFRA. We tried to put it into DEFRA 3 years ago, again last year, and we were successful this year. We applied for 10 licences. DEFRA put into ICAT for 10 licences, and they've been issued around the country.
And how much difference? How much difference, Chris, does this potentially make to West Country ports?
the bluefin tuna arriving is massive for the whole of the country, really. Back early 60s, 50s and 60s, we had massive celebrities coming over fishing for them. Ports like Mevagissey, where I'm out of, if we've got a good fishery, lots of people coming, staying and going and catching them, and then with a sustainable commercial as well.
Why have they does anyone know the reason why the bluefin tuna, and I've been out with you and I've seen huge numbers of these fish busting the surface. It's an incredible, amazing and exciting sight. Does anyone really know why they've come back?
I don't think they do. Water temperatures, they're saying, but I don't see any change in the last sort of 18 years that I've been out at sea. There does seem to be a northerly movement of fish. So whether it's just something to do with that migration, they're on a cycle. They seem to be on a cycle of about 40 years. Cod are on a cycle of about 7 years. So we see rises and fall in all species.
Well, let's hope the bluefin are here for a long time to stay, and I wish you luck with your first day commercial bluefin tuna fishing tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it advertised in our restaurants. I very much hope we do. And it may be little acorns compared to, as you say, the massive quota that European countries have, but it's a start and you've helped make it happen. Chris Gill, thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are, a good news story. Good news environmentally and, you know, good news actually business-wise for our country, particularly the West Country. In a moment, another good news story. It's about manufacturing returning to Britain. Is this the beginning of something post-Brexit?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
history is far more dynamic than most people realise. Yes, history changes because new facts emerge. Now, Sir Keith Park was a New Zealander, Gallipoli veteran, First World War Royal Flying Corps ace, who is one of the great unsung heroes of this country and the fact we kept our independence in 1940. I thought for many, many years he went unrecognised, but now, in the last few years, a statue of him has been put up in central London. It was unveiled by the Queen herself, and it's a very good statue. It was actually paid for chiefly by a British businessman called Terry Smith. But now, Sir Keith Park's history has changed again, and in, I think, a remarkable and very positive and perhaps rather illuminating way. And I'm joined by Leo McKinstry, journalist, Second World War historian and author of Hurricane, Victor of the Battle of Britain. Leo, give us the update of what has happened to Sir Keith Park.
Well, Nigel, you're a great campaigner for British independence and British freedom. But as you said, no one did it more for British freedom in 1940 than Sir Keith Park, who was the commander of number 11 Group, which was right in the front line of the fight in the Battle of Britain against the Luftwaffe. And without Keith Park's strategic leadership and wise husbandry of resources, the RAF would have struggled very badly. And Keith Park was a brilliant leader, both in developing the right tactics and in motivating his men. He was quite superb on that. And the thing that has changed is we always knew he was a fine commander. You mentioned Gallipoli. He was brave at Gallipoli and in the First World War in the Royal Flying Corps. And after the Battle of Britain, he served in Malta. He was vital to protecting the RAF and the island of Malta during the siege in 1942. And then he served in the Far East with distinction. But 1940 was his golden moment. And his role as the commander of number 11 Group is quite well known, but it's now emerged thanks to brilliant research by Dilip Sarkar, who's a superb historian of the Battle of Britain. He's written over 50 books on the battle. But Keith Park actually can be designated one of the few. The few is the title that was given to the roughly 3,000 men of the RAF who served during the Battle of Britain. And they owe their name to Churchill's famous speech on 18th of August 1940 when he said, "Never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few." And the qualification is you have to have served in 2 operational sorties during the Battle of Britain from late July until mid-September. And it was always thought that Keith Park hadn't done that, but Dilip Sarkar got hold in New Zealand of his logbook and ascertained that he served in at least 2 sorties, one escorting Winston Churchill to Uxbridge and one escorting a convoy in the North Sea. So he now is entitled to the clasp and recognition as one of the few.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was 48 years old, and there he was in a hurricane, out on operational sorties. And this means, of course, Leo, that his name will be added to the memorial at Capel Le Fern on the White Cliffs of Dover.
Capel Le Fern, which is... I live down in Thanet, and it's very near where I am, and it's a place that I often visit to take inspiration. Those men were so brave, and what the whole destiny of mankind in the course of British history would have been completely different if people like Keith Park hadn't been so brave against the Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
And that's...
And a very, very quick thought, Leo, if I can. Everyone knows about the Spitfire, its beautiful lines, its wonderful angles, its agility, and we love seeing it. The Hurricane slightly gets ignored. Why did you call it the victor of the Battle of Britain?
Well, just statistically, when Dilip Sarkar's own research bears this out, that for every one plane shot down by Spitfire, 2 of the Luftwaffe, 2 Luftwaffe planes were shot down by Hurricanes. You know, they made up the majority of the force in the fighter command during the Battle of Britain. They made up the majority of the pilots of the squadrons, and they bore the brunt of the battle. And the Hurricane was at its peak in 1940. It became obsolete after 1940, whereas the Spitfire went on being developed.
It did its job, and you've documented it beautifully. And Leo, thank you for coming on and joining me on a day when history gets updated and changes in a positive way. Leo McKinstry, thank you. Now, we're used to hearing stories about Brexit being really bad for everything, but you see, businesses that are capable of adapting they take changed circumstances and they actually draw some benefit from it. And one of those is Barry Leahy, president of Playdale Playgrounds. Barry, tell us your story. Tell us how you adapted to the changed circumstances of Brexit.
Good evening, Nigel, and everyone. Yeah, listen, I'm not going to paint that everything was rosy, but it was change, right? And we were used to change. At Playdale, where we were traditionally a 9th-generation family business, we've gone through plagues, we've gone through world wars, we've gone through, now COVID. So I'm guessing we were used to those kind of obstacles in the road, and we are an agile business, and we were an exporter already, and we were exporting to third countries. So it was just adapting to that paperwork. And once we got our heads around that, it was away we went. We trained people, we developed people, we trained people, and that allowed us to grow. Now, since 2020, our international business is up by 75%.
Wow.
So I think there's a lot to, that development and preparation, and just having that sheer ambition that we have.
Yeah, and there's evidence too, isn't there, perhaps of small manufacturers making more now in the United Kingdom. What was it? Because, if you listen to the BBC, they'll tell you Brexit's a catastrophe for business. How is it that you managed to adapt, but the BBC haven't quite caught up with that yet?
Through hard work and having a strategy, Nigel. We had a plan. We got ready. We listened to the advice given. Yeah. The Department of International Trade as it was, Department of Business and Trade as it is now. They gave us advice out there in the field, and we listened to it, and then we trained our individuals to get their heads around it. And I guess we've got this inner desire to outperform our competition. And once you get your head around that, it's like athletes, isn't it? If you want to be truly world class, you've got to continually to train.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do. We've trained our individuals in the business. We continue to train our individuals in the business. Skills, etc., that you hear people talk about with the victim mentality of we don't have enough. Well, we train, I'm based in South Cumbria. We've interviewed shepherds and shepherdesses in the last 10 years for jobs. We've got a people shortage, never mind a skills shortage. Now, they were great at counting, but their IT skills weren't great. But we've put people like that through courses. We've got business development.
Barry, I have to say,
we're continually doing that.
Barry, we're out of time. Barry Lee here, we're out of time. Just love your positivity. Love the idea that you can adapt and cope with change, and well done at Playdale for all that you do. Thank you. Well, there we are. We've had one or two quite positive stories to end today. I think perhaps we need a bit more of that. We need cheering up sometime. Now, Jacob is genuinely off for a couple of weeks, not broadcasting from his large country home in Somerset. Patrick Christys is standing in for him. Patrick, in a word, what have we got?
Oh, well, loads. OK, so student accommodation being used to house migrants. Are the French to blame for what happened in the Channel? And the head of Extinction Rebellion has absolutely slammed you, Les.
Oh, well, nothing too much then coming up in the next hour or so. Now, surely somebody tell me the weather. It's simply, at some point in August, just got to get better, hasn't it? Let's have a look.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain today, clearing overnight, a few showers following, but many places will be fine. During Tuesday, as low pressure moves into the North Sea, taking its weather fronts with it. However, one occluded feature is just providing some additional rainfall to the northeast of England through the night, some damp weather continuing here. Eventually it becomes light to moderate rain. Showers across western areas, drier towards the southeast with some clear spells, but wherever you are, it's not going to be a cold night, 12 to 14 Celsius generally. And it will be a bright start to Tuesday, certainly across southern areas compared with Monday. Plenty of sunshine around. Still the remnants of the cloud and rain clearing from the northeast of England, southeast Scotland. First